All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going deep on Exodus chapter 36.
Excellent choice.
Your source from my Christian space, it really stood out to me. It's got so much in it about the Israelites, how they connect with God, and all those details about building the tabernacle. I think we're in for some fascinating insights.
You got it. This is more than just some ancient construction guide.
Right.
Exodus 36 gives us a look into how the Israelites put their faith into action, like really lived it out.
Absolutely. And the source, right away, it talks about, the craftsmen and their skills. Like, these weren't just talented people.
Oh, yeah.
Exodus 36.1 and 2, it actually repeats that God gave them that wisdom, that special ability.
That really got me thinking, do we sometimes kind of limit God by thinking we have to do everything relying on our own strength?
That is a great question. It really ties into this huge theme in Exodus, God's provision. When God calls us to do something, he gives us what we need to get it done. It's not about us just, pushing through with willpower or talent.
Yeah. It's about letting go, surrendering to God's guidance, and letting him work through us.
That makes a lot of sense. And the story about the offerings, it really brings that home, doesn't it? The source points out that Moses, he didn't pressure anybody, didn't set quotas.
Nope, no quotas.
Just let God work on people's hearts.
Exactly.
And the response, it was incredible.
It was.
In fact, they actually had to tell people, hold up, stop giving. It's in Exodus 36.667.
Amazing, isn't it?
Almost comical, right? Like they had no idea how much they need. Moses just trusted God, and bam, overwhelming abundance. Imagine if we tackled our tasks with that kind of faith, huh? Really, like, believing God will give us the tools, the skills, the resources, everything.
Think about your own skills, the things you're good at. Maybe you're a fantastic teacher, maybe you're a great listener, or you're just awesome at solving problems. Those aren't just random abilities. They're gifts from God, given to you for a reason. He's getting you ready, equipping you to be part of his story, just like he equipped the Israelites to build that tabernacle.
Wow, okay. So the tabernacle itself, the source gets into all these details about its construction. You can tell every single element was designed exactly how God wanted it. This wasn't just some random tent, right?
Not at all. The tabernacle, it was way more than that. It was meant to be like a portable house for God, showing that he was with his people. Every detail mattered. From the materials to the size, everything had symbolic meaning.
The source, it points out the layers of covering, the ram skins, that fine leather. It wasn't just about making a practical tent, was it? There's got to be a deeper meaning there.
You're spot on. It's about separation, both physically and symbolically, between the sacred space and, well, everything else. It's like a reminder that approaching God, it calls for reverence, recognizing how holy he is.
That gets me thinking, if the tabernacle is all about God being present with his people, what does that say about how we should worship today? Like, do we need to build physical structures, or are there other ways to create that sacred space in our lives?
That is a really interesting question. You see, the tabernacle was a visual reminder for the Israelites. It showed them God was with them wherever they went. We don't have a physical tabernacle today, but we do have the Holy Spirit dwelling within us.
So maybe it's about creating that space inside, that awareness that God is present in our hearts and minds.
Exactly. Cultivating reverence and awe, recognizing that God is with us always, even in the middle of everyday life.
The source goes on to describe some specifics about the construction, the dimensions of those planks, the fact that 3 sides were completely closed off, no entrance, no exit. It's like reading an ancient blueprint.
And those details weren't just random. They were part of God's plan, serving a purpose. Like the fact that 3 sides were enclosed, that really highlighted the idea of the tabernacle being a sanctuary, a place set apart for God.
It makes you appreciate the craftsmanship, the thought behind every little detail.
It really does. And it's a reminder that when we approach God, we should do it intentionally, with reverence.
Speaking of details, the source also mentions this whole system of bars and rings, for stability. I'm curious, do those things have symbolic meaning, or were they purely functional?
I think it's both. Practically speaking, they were essential. Got to keep that tabernacle stable, especially since it was designed to be moved. But symbolically, they represent unity, how the community was interconnected. Just like those bars and rings held the structure together, the Israelites were meant to be bound together by their faith, their commitment to God.
That's a beautiful image, isn't it? We're not meant to go through this faith journey alone. We need each other for support, encouragement to keep each other accountable.
That's right. Just like those individual bars and rings, when they're connected, they create something strong and stable. We're stronger together, supporting each other along the way.
Okay, let's move on to another interesting point the source brings up. The veil. The one that separated the holy place from the most holy place. I know veils pop up a lot in the Bible, but what's the significance here?
The veil was like a physical barrier, and a symbolic one too. It limited access to God's presence. Only the high priest could go into the most holy place, and even then, only once a year on the Day of Atonement.
So it created this sense of awe, of reverence, emphasizing how holy God is and how seriously we should approach him. It makes me think, don't we often create our own veils, our own barriers to experiencing God? And sometimes those barriers aren't a physical curtain, right? They're internal, like walls of fear or doubt.
That's a great point. We can let our fears, insecurities, even past hurts create distance between us and God.
So the veil in the tabernacle, it wasn't just a literal thing. It was a symbol of everything that can separate us from God.
Exactly. And if we look at it from a New Testament perspective, the veil takes on an even deeper meaning. When Jesus died on the cross, the veil in the temple was torn in two. Access to God was now open to everyone through Christ. He removed that barrier, that separation between us and God.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. So the veil in the tabernacle, it foreshadowed Jesus's role. He's the ultimate bridge between humanity and God.
Yes, that's right. That's it. Through Jesus, we have that direct connection with God. We don't need a high priest or some special ceremony. We can come to him, boldly, confidently, knowing we're loved and welcomed.
That's powerful stuff. It makes me think, if the veil represents all those things that separate us from God, what are some of the veils we might need to lift in our own lives today? What are those things that get in the way?
That's a really good question. It could be anything, really. Anything that blocks us from God, that hurts our relationship with him, or stops us from truly experiencing his presence. It could be unforgiveness, maybe pride, fear, doubt, even just being too busy, too distracted.
It's so easy to get caught up in the daily grind, isn't it? And lose sight of what really matters.
It really is. But the tabernacle, it reminds us to make space for God, both in our life and in our hearts. Just like the Israelites set aside a special place for God, we need to do the same. Set aside time, create that space for him.
So it's not just about showing up at church on Sunday, right? It's about being aware of God's presence all week long in everything we do.
Exactly. It's about making that conscious choice to invite God in, to let him guide our decisions, to listen for his voice in the quiet moments.
Go back to how the tabernacle was built. The source mentions that even the tiniest details, like those bars and rings, they were all designed for a reason. They had a purpose. Makes you wonder if there are any modern-day parallels to that kind of attention to detail, that meticulous craftsmanship.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the precision, the care that goes into building a skyscraper, a bridge, even a smartphone. Those structures, they have a beauty, a complexity to them that echoes the craftsmanship of the tabernacle.
Amazing how those ancient building techniques can still inspire us today.
And it's not just about the technical skill, is it? It's about the dedication, the heart behind it. The Israelites, they were committed to creating a place for God that was truly worthy of his presence. And we should have that same level of dedication, that intentionality in our own lives as we try to honor God.
So whether we're building a skyscraper or just building our lives, it's about doing it with excellence, with a heart that's focused on God.
That's a great way to put it. And that brings us back to the core of Exodus 36. God provides. He didn't just give the Israelites the blueprints for the tabernacle. He gave them the skills, the resources, everything they needed to get it done.
That's a powerful reminder that we're not in this alone. God is with us, guiding us, providing for us every step of the way.
And just like he took care of the Israelites in the wilderness, he takes care of us today. He might not always provide in the ways we expect, but he's always faithful.
Wow, this deep dive into Exodus 36 has really been something else. It's made me stop and think about, those ways I might be holding myself back from God, those veils I need to lift,
Yeah, I think that's a key takeaway for everyone, really. What about you? What really stood out to you about the tabernacle?
Honestly, it's the contrast. You've got this incredibly detailed structure, every little measurement, every material, all spelled out by God. It speaks to his precision, his order. But then you've got this overflowing generosity from the people. No quotas, no pressure, just like open hearts responding to God. It's like structure, spontaneity all rolled into one.
That's a beautiful way to put it. That push and pull, the divine plan and human freedom, it's all through the Bible, isn't it? And the tabernacle, it really embodies that perfectly.
It makes me wonder, though, like, what if those craftsmen, what if they got so hung up on all the little details, the perfect measurements, that they missed the bigger picture? The fact that this was all about God's presence. Would it have been as meaningful then?
That's a deep question. It really highlights that danger, doesn't it? Getting lost in the how-to and forgetting the why. We can be so busy doing things the right way that we miss the heart of worship altogether.
So, as we wrap up here, I think the challenge for our listeners is this. How do we take these lessons from the tabernacle and apply them to our own lives? What are those veils we need to lift? And how can we find that balance, the structure and the spontaneity in our relationship with God?
Such important questions to reflect on. Maybe it starts simply with asking God to show us those veils, those things that are blocking us from experiencing Him more fully.
And remembering that He provides not just the materials for a building, but the grace, the guidance we need to build lives that honor Him.
Exactly. He equipped those craftsmen, and He equips us too. The key is surrendering to His plan, trusting Him, even when we don't have all the answers.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through Exodus 36. May we all be inspired to lift our veils, embrace God's provision, and build lives that truly reflect His glory.